นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนะมัสสามิ So blessings and good day to you all in Bodhi Heart Buddhist Sanctuary, and anyone else who's listening. Today we've come together on the occasion of the entering of the rains, or the first day of the annual rains retreat for 2022, or 2565 in the Buddhist era. And this day is not so much public celebration as was yesterday, the day we call Asalaha Puja, where people recollect and remember the first teaching of the Buddha, the Dhamma Sutta. Yesterday was the full moon of July, and for example, in our monastery, we came together and meditated all night, chanted, listened to Dhamma teachings. It's one of the three important Buddhist festivals that monasteries and Buddhists all over the world will celebrate. So that's Wesak, Asalaha Puja, and then Magha Puja in February. But today is the first day of the rains retreat, which is a particularly a monastic practice for those who, monks and nuns, staying in monasteries, hermitages, or on their own in a kuti or a cave somewhere since the time of the Buddha. Buddhist monastics have kept to this practice, this rule that the Buddha introduced for us, partly out of compassion for the Sangha themselves, to give them a place to stay, and just to determine for 3 months to stay in one place during the monsoon season, and partly out of compassion for the laity, because if monks and nuns are walking around the countryside trampling their plants, their new rice plants, well, that could cause them some problems. So we have this tradition now for the last 2,500 odd years, entering the rains and staying in one place, making a determination to stay in one place for 3 months. So it's a really good time for the monastic communities to put effort into their practice, because there's less movement, less traveling around for whatever purpose, for teaching, visiting people in different situations. We stay in one place for 3 months and focus on the study of the Dhamma, the Vinaya, and the practice of meditation. So it's a time of retreat. But because of it's a monastic practice, doesn't mean to say that the lay people, the lay Buddhists, don't have any role in that, or cannot benefit from that. You know, it's a time where if you're associated with a group of monks or nuns anywhere, you have a monastery, a hermitage, a place where you attend, at least sometimes. It's a time for you to maybe make your own determination to practice for the 3 months of the rains retreat in your own way. And maybe it's a time for you to increase your efforts. You know, normally you may meditate sometimes, maybe not every day. Maybe sometimes you think about keeping precepts, 5 precepts, 8 precepts. Maybe sometimes you go to a place of worship, a monastery, a temple, to make offerings, but maybe it's not that regularly that you do it. But for this period of the rains retreat, what many Buddhists do is say, well, this is a time I'm going to commit more to my own personal practice, just as the Sangha monks and nuns are doing that. We can take on our own practices and make our own rules and determinations for ourselves, what we can do to improve our efforts in our own practice. So the heart of the Buddhist practice is practice of dana, sila, and bhavana. Dana is generosity, sila, the practice of virtue, virtuous conduct, and that's usually symbolized by keeping or undertaking to keep precepts, to train ourselves, our conduct. So that's training our actions, our speech. So that's 5 precepts or the 8 precepts. Or if you're a monastic, then it can be the 10 precepts or the patimokkha, whichever. Morality usually is practiced through keeping, undertaking to keep precepts. And then, of course, bhavana, cultivating the qualities of the mind through meditation, particularly samatha bhavana, and then vipassana bhavana. Samatha is developing the ability to one-point the mind, make the mind calm. Vipassana is developing insight into the true nature of phenomena, developing insight into the impermanent nature of physical, mental phenomena, the unsatisfactory nature and the selfless nature of phenomena. So this is our regular practice, but a vasa, the range retreat, is a time you might commit to doing a bit more than usual, with the aim of improving your life. We use these practices of generosity, virtue, and meditation to improve ourselves as human beings, because that's what we all want. We all want happiness. And if your starting point is you have faith in the Buddha and his teachings, then you already have some confidence that the Buddhist path of generosity, virtue, and meditation is an effective path, a good way to develop yourself. And like any pathway, you can travel along it slowly or quickly. That depends on you, on your effort, your commitment, how much time, effort you put into it. So retreats are quite useful times to improve our commitment, because the way of the world is very distracting, absorbing of our time and energy, mental energy, physical energy. You know, we all know what it's like day by day as we go through our life. It's so easy to lose track, lose our way. You might say to get off the path, to fall off the path. It's very easy. And often that happens because we have genuine responsibilities, things we have to do. So we have jobs, we have families, people to look after, we have things we're trying to do in life. But often that can pull us away from the Dhamma, the practice of the path leading towards liberation. And sometimes without us realizing. You know, we all know the problem of working endlessly day after day, often working long hours and getting caught up into our whatever our particular work or business is, to the point where we're not really thinking about what the Buddha taught at all. We're just struggling to keep afloat. Maybe sometimes we get burnt out, get tired, sometimes we get ill. And then there's all kinds of obstacles and problems that come up as we go about our business, looking after ourselves or our family or our work. And we just end up a long way from the Dhamma. Even though we've had faith in the past, we have faith. Occasionally we go to temples, monasteries. It's so easy to get lost and drift away from that. So a retreat time is a really good time to come back to your basic practices and make commitments for yourself, resolutions, what can you do, as a way to transform your mind, your heart, your mind, your life into something better, And for most of us, that transformation is, it's a gradual transformation. Most people don't get really quick results in their practice. The results, the improvements, the benefits of this practice tend to come slowly through effort. But when you have a period of time that you commit to doing certain practices, then that can be a way to improve your effort and to learn new things, or commit to doing certain practices that you already know are good, but you haven't done enough of. So you take a period of time like this 3-month range retreat to come gather your mental and physical energy inwards a bit and use the ways of practice that the Buddha gave us in a very practical way, a very direct way to train ourselves. It is a training. Even the word training, sometimes people recoil. They don't want to do more training in their life because they've already done training, at school, colleges, work, on-the-job training, extra training, additional qualifications, and so on. So the word training sometimes puts us off. But here we're talking about training of the heart, and a training that leads to more happiness, more peace, more understanding in our life. But it, for want of a better word, it is training. People can really change their life for the better, this sense of transforming themselves through the practice. But you have to give it a chance, don't you? You give it a chance through making that effort. So one of Ajahn Chah's famous sayings was that he said, you just keep doing it, keep practicing, continue with the practice, don't give up. And whether you feel like you do it, you want to do it, or you feel like you don't want to do it, you still do it. Learning to have that sense of commitment and regular commitment and willingness to put effort into your Dhamma practice every day, whatever else is going on in your mind, however you're feeling and whatever's going on in your life. And obviously life can be a mixture of up and down. Sometimes things on the outside are going well. Sometimes there's a lot of obstacles and difficulties and challenges in our life. But the idea is to keep this commitment to the practice and the effort we put into our Dhamma practice going. And so our 3-month range retreat is a time when you can really learn how to do that. You might make your commitment. You say, I'm going to do some particular kinds of dana or practice generosity in a certain way regularly for the next 3 months. So some people are fortunate, they can go to a Buddhist monastery, say, and make offerings to the Sangha and practice dana every day. Or they may even be staying in a center or a monastery and do certain practices every day, practices of dana, generosity. But if you're not able to do that, well, maybe once a week or once a fortnight, something like that. Or we can also do other forms of dana and practice generosity through volunteering and giving and sharing in different ways, online even. We can practice dana. We can practice dana in the family, with our friends, with our colleagues as well. But look to see how you can improve your practice of generosity through the next 3 months. And is there any kind of rule or practice that you could take on for yourself in your situation that will help you to get into good habits? Because a lot of our practice and the way the mind and our heart transforms for the better is through repeated skillful action. So that may be the practice of dana. So when I used to live in Thailand, and people would begin their day in the villages, towns, even the cities, by making an offering, a small offering of some food to monks, for example, before they go to work. And so like in the 3 months of the range retreat, if it's possible, of course, not everyone can do that, but if it's possible, you could think of something like that. How can I practice some dana by supporting the Sangha on a regular basis for 3 months, wherever you are in the world, wherever you're living, whatever your situation, how can you do that? And you have to think about it. And the Buddha said this is how our wisdom faculty develops. First of all, it's through the practice of sharing and giving and supporting Sangha. There's other ways to give as well, as of course. So practicing charities with other good causes. That's something you can think of. How can I practice my giving, my sharing in more skillful ways, effective ways, whether it's supporting Sangha or supporting a good cause, people in need, the disadvantaged, people who are suffering in different places. What can I do? But at this time, the beginning of the 3-month range retreat, you make your plan. So you have to think it through, use your mind, and that's a very wholesome activity. You know, if you sit down and just think of ways to help other people already, that brings a very good feeling to your mind, doesn't it? Even just the thought of it, even if you haven't put it into action yet. Brightens the mind. We feel a little bit more positive from that way of thinking. But we have to direct it with wisdom. In Thailand, they say you have to be clever in the way you help others. You have to think, how can you do it effectively? Whether it's simply making a financial donation to a charity or helping an individual who needs help, how can you do that effectively and well? You have to think it through. Or supporting the Sangha, similarly. Yeah, even if you're cooking food for someone, whether you're cooking food for the homeless or you're cooking food for homeless monks or nuns, you need to use your intelligence how to do that effectively, how to cook a meal, what ingredients you need, how to get those ingredients together. And we know at the moment a lot of things are hard to get because the economy is struggling a bit in some parts of the world. So you have to think it through. What can you do with the limited resources you have, maybe, or maybe you're lucky you don't have limitations, but you have to think it through. I remember when I was a layperson, I used to once in a while go and support Lumpur Sumedho's new monastery, Chithurst Buddhist Monastery in southern England. I just started practicing Buddhism and found out about that monastery. This is before I was a monk. And I went down there the first time and I was in the kitchen where they used to cook every day because they wouldn't get any daily visitors to bring food. They were the Anigarikas, trainee monks and nuns would cook. And I asked them, you know, what do they need? And they said, anything. They said some days there really wasn't quite enough food for the community. And those days there was about 25 people living there. And with no visitors, they just cooked on site. So there's often not much fresh food and so on, fresh fruit or vegetables. A lot of what they eat was very just sort of stores, things that were stored up often for long periods of time. So I, planned how can I help them get some more fresh food, say. And I just did occasionally what I could, but this is how you begin your practice, learning how to offer dana effectively and well, to see what's needed. And sometimes you get it wrong. Sometimes I would cook some food and I'd sometimes cook too much, sometimes too little. But the idea was I was trying to learn how to do it well, do it effectively to support the community. And the practice of charity or sharing is like that. It's a learning thing. You have to put your heart into it, make a commitment, and then you learn from what you're doing. And sometimes you get it wrong. You make mistakes. You offer something that wasn't really that effective or useful, or you offer too little or too much. But you learn from the experience over time what can be useful. And doing it yourself is where you really learn, isn't it? Like in the time of the Buddha, there was those stories of those people who would say somebody who was fairly well off, and they were working, or they were in charge of their business or their farm, and they had some faith to support the Buddha and the monks, but they would never go themselves to offer food to the Sangha. They'd just send their assistant, their worker, their servant, their whoever. They'd never go themselves. And the Buddha criticized that. He said, you have to do it yourself sometimes. Even though you're making some good karma and you are practicing generosity when you give your things to somebody else to take to a place, say, if you don't do it yourself in person, you don't have that strong feel, that strong memory. It doesn't make such an impact on your mind if you just sort of give it to somebody else to do, farm it out, or give it to somebody else. If you're going to make an offering, even an offering to charity, or do some voluntary work, or support a sangha somewhere, you need to go and do it in person sometimes, just to really teach yourself to go through those motions of whether it's cooking and offering food, whatever you're doing, you actually have to physically do it sometimes to really teach yourself. And that's one of the problems of the modern world, is we're very good now at doing everything remotely, online, push button. So you can make a donation by transferring funds, or you can give an instruction to somebody over the phone or something. And, that can still be a good action, a skillful action. But sometimes we need to actually get out there and do it, teach ourselves to physically do that act of dana in whatever way we can. And this is how we begin our practice, really, learning how to help others, using our intelligence, using this body for a good purpose. You have to ask yourself, when you're born as a human being, you have this body. How are you going to use your body in this life? To do good, or just nowadays we often are using our bodies just to indulge, just to seek pleasure all the time, to enjoy ourselves. And that's not always wrong, but if that becomes your whole purpose, just to enjoy, to seek pleasure, and you never do any good for others, you never develop yourself in the practice, then it's like almost like you've got this unused resource, your human body. It's not really being used to its full potential. So the practice of dana is something you could think about and commit to when this time at the beginning of the range retreat. How can you improve your practice of generosity, helping others? The same with your practice of virtue, keeping precepts. We use this body, our mouths, our body, to do things every day. We make karma every day through body and speech, and it originates in our mind, but the body is the vehicle for making karma. We make often the strongest karma just through our actions and the words we say. So it's another reflection. How are you going to use your body, your actions, your speech, this range retreat? And the Buddha gave us guidelines. He gave us the 5 precepts, very simple set of guidelines for our conduct, refraining from killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying and abusive speech, and refraining from using intoxicants. Again, it's a reflection on how are you going to use your body for the next 3 months. What activities you're going to undergo and be involved with, how are you going to conduct yourself, how are you going to speak to other people. And so people will commit to, say, keeping the 5 precepts for 3 months as well as they can. You're not expecting to be perfect. We start off with a mind that is prone to lapses of judgment, making poor decisions sometimes. Sometimes we're not mindful. Sometimes we get strong emotions come up and it leads us to say or do unskillful, hurtful things, foolish things, things that we regret later. we're not expecting to be perfect, but the whole point is that the Buddha gave us this pathway to transform ourselves, developing good habits, developing more mindfulness and awareness, more understanding. And the practice of precepts in the beginning is development of the quality of restraint, moderation, and learning to conduct ourselves in a way that doesn't bring us feelings of regret, remorse, guilt. And it can be really transformative. People who have started off from a place of being really miserable, suffering deeply in their life, can transform their life through just taking on, say, the practice of the 5 precepts for a period of time, and change their habits for the better. If you're somebody who habitually kills any kind of animal, small or larger, that comes into your life, pests, insects, or even bigger things, if you're a hunter, say, then taking on this rule can really change you, can't it? You start to cut out the harming of other living creatures. You do that consciously with mindfulness. You take on that precept. That's the first precept, not to consciously, deliberately harm someone, a human or an animal. That has a very powerful effect on your heart, because it means every time the thought, the intention to kill, a bug or a mouse that's invaded your property or something that you want to get rid of, you're not following that intention. You're changing the whole direction of your response to various things in your life. You withhold your hand from hitting the mosquito. You don't kill the mouse. You don't kill whatever it is. That's a very, very big change, and will bring up naturally its good karmic result is that the mind starts to be softer and more compassionate to the beings you encounter, and you start to respect life, your own life and the life of others more. And it has this knock-on effect, gradual effect of developing the qualities of kindness, compassion, by just keeping this one rule. And if you think about it, the Buddha called this Mahadana, a great gift for the world. If you keep the first precept, you decide not to kill, harm other beings, and you keep that, say, just for 3 months, already you've given a lot of peace, safety, happiness to the beings, the people around you, the animals around you, for those 3 months, by just keeping this one rule. And particularly if you're coming from a very untrained, difficult place, it can be transformative in the sense, it can really change your whole lifestyle. So I know people who've caught fish for a living, but through practicing the Dhamma, going to monasteries, even for 3 months, entering a monastery for 3 months, they've decided to give up even their lifestyle of fishing, say, for example, or hunting, by coming into contact with other people who keep precepts and deciding they no longer want to pursue the killing of animals through hunting, fishing, whatever. You meet people through life who have done that, and it's really changed their life for the better. You can see it may take time, but over time they've really benefited. When I first was in Thailand, I went my first year to stay in a monastery, rather small monastery near the Laotian border, very quiet place. And there was one old man, very sweet old man, keeping the 8 precepts there, wearing white with a shaven head. And his son was a monk, but not in that monastery. And I went to stay in that monastery for about a year. And this old man, I got to know him, learning Thai, and I was speaking to him, and he told me his life story. This was a very sweet, peaceful old man who'd meditate every day, sweep the leaves, help the monks in the various jobs that they did, and was living what you might call a very skillful and peaceful life. He told me his life story, and he had been up until about the 1930s, and this was already 30 years ago, and then the 1930s were a period before that. Up until the 1920s, 1930s, he had been a robber. He admitted. He called himself a highwayman. He had a horse with a couple of accomplices, and they would go out and rob people riding their horses, so like an old-fashioned highwayman. And they had guns, and occasionally there'd be shooting match with other people defending their property or whatever from the thieves, the robbers. But by the time he became about 35, 40 years old, he realized he was getting older, and he just realized this is no way for a human being to live. You know, stealing and carrying a gun and shooting people. So he quit, and he wasn't caught by the police. You know, this remained a secret with him. He quit, and he became a farmer. He settled down, and then later on, feeling a sense of remorse and regret for how he'd spent his earlier years as a thief, he actually entered the monastery. But he didn't feel brave enough to become a monk, but he kept the 8 precepts for many, many years, the last part of his life. And so when you met him, he was a very sweet old man who understood a lot about Dhamma. You know, he had heard Dhamma every week from the monks' talks and teachings he'd received for like maybe 30 years. He'd meditated, kept the precepts for 30 years. So even though the beginning of his life, he had started off as a highwayman, a robber, chasing after people with his gun on his horse, you know, he ended his life in a monastery. And you could see it was a real transformation. If nobody had told you, you wouldn't think he'd previously been a robber. Maybe he still had some regrets in his mind. He said he did, but generally his mind was very peaceful because he knew he'd chosen the right path. And he said, you know, his pathway to enlightenment was a kind of a zigzag path, a roundabout path, because he'd lost his way in his youth. It wasn't a direct path. You know, most people are not highwaymen, robbers. They're probably better behaved than that. So their path is a bit more direct. But he knew his path had been roundabout. But he said, but you know, you've got to go from where you've been in your life. You've got to go in the direction that you know is right. And even if it means you go around, take a few detours, and it's a slightly longer path, well, so be it. But he was peaceful at the end of his life, and I knew him up to the point when he died. He died peaceful because he'd found his path and he'd changed. And a huge part of that change came about by keeping the 5 precepts and then the 8 precepts. And just the first precept, deciding to give up, you know, the use of a gun, violence. And the precepts are like this, they're for transforming us. You need, just like the practice of dana, you need wisdom. Keeping the precepts, you need wisdom. You need to think it through and maybe come to a point where you realize the value of these precepts, and you have to remind yourself of that from time to time. Especially say you keep the precepts for 3 months, 5 precepts, 8 precepts. There may be times when in other aspects of your life, your meditation, things are going along slowly, or you're facing difficulty. Maybe you're feeling really disappointed. Maybe your mind is not peaceful, because meditation is another, you know, part of the practice which is very challenging, and we don't always find immediate success, or there's, you know, ups and downs. But if you've been keeping the 5 precepts or the 8 precepts, you can always come back to that as a reflection and just remind yourself the good you're doing by not harming others, not stealing, not committing acts of sexual misconduct, cheating on your partner, say, not lying or abusing others through your speech, not taking intoxicants. You know, one of the reasons we train with the precepts is that they bring this sense of buoyancy and happiness to the mind, but we also have to remind ourselves of that. Because sometimes we forget the good we're doing. We're so caught up in other aspects of practice, especially when we come to practice meditation, everybody knows how frustrating it is. Everyone wants to deal with negative thoughts and wants to attain samadhi and gain insight. We have those goals, but they're quite challenging goals. And the mind isn't always in the best of spaces. When you meditate, you notice that your mind may be very unpeaceful, very disturbed. But if you've got a foundation in precepts, 5 or 8 precepts that you've taken on for a period of time, and you've kept them reasonably well, that's something to rejoice in, isn't it? If you didn't kill anyone today, you didn't steal anything today, you haven't told a lie today, that's something you can rejoice in. It's actually a kind of meditation. I call it silanusati, recollecting the virtue, the morality that you've practiced today or in the past. And then the qualities that allow you to keep precepts, the sense of restraint, mindfulness, and what we call hiriotapa, sense of shame, awareness of the consequences of your actions. So we say a conscience. You've developed a conscience, so you steer away from doing unskillful things, saying unskillful things, because there are consequences that bring you and others suffering. So you steer away from doing those. And this is hiriotapa. You have this sense of watching over your behavior, your thoughts, your speech, your action, taking care of what you're doing, thinking about what you're doing, making wise decisions based on keeping the precepts, and cultivating these qualities. So when you recollect your precepts as a meditation, you recollect the good you've done by keeping precepts. You're recollecting your practice of goodness in your heart through your speech and your actions. And that's something to rejoice in. However disturbed your mind is, however confused you are, caught up in anger or greed, the Buddha said if you don't display it through your speech, your actions, through your external conduct, you're still blameless, in the sense you've built up karma from the past, habits, some unskillful habits. You still get angry, you still have greed, you may have some very wild thoughts, unhappy thoughts coming up in your mind. But if you have enough awareness not to act on them, that's something to be happy about. That means you have sila, you understand what is virtuous conduct. You have enough awareness to stop yourself from killing or stealing or whatever it may be. That is something to be very happy about. And you're blameless. If it's just a thought and you're not acting on it, then you haven't actually made any strong karma there. If you indulge that thought, okay, there's a little bit of mental karma made. And that's why we practice meditation. Bhavana is to work on that, to actually remove the unskillful states of mind, to see them and remove them from our stream of consciousness, from our thinking. But if you're not acting on them with your speech, your actions, physically, mentally, verbally, you're not creating heavy bad karma there. You're not doing anything, even if on the inside you're angry, or you're full of anxiety and fear, or you're full of greed, desire. If you're not acting on it, that's something very good. And this is a point you have to really become aware of in your practice, that just because we have a negative, unwholesome thought arising in our mind doesn't yet make us necessarily a bad person, or it's not something to feel too depressed about. If when it arises you have enough awareness to say, no, I'm not going to say this, I'm not going to do this, that's actually something very good there. And karma is made in the present moment. We've made karma in the past, so we have memories and we have thoughts, sometimes crazy thoughts, extreme thoughts, very unskillful thoughts arise as a result of past karma. But if you have enough mindfulness in the present moment not to act on them, not to say it, not to do it, that's fresh, very good, fresh, new karma going in the right direction. That's where you change, isn't it? People are always coming to us and saying, as a monk, they come to you and they say, how can I change my karma? I've done so many bad things in the past. And, you feel so much guilt, regret about the past. Well, the way you change your karma is in the present, because we can't go back into the past. We haven't got a time machine to go back and fix everything up. It'd be nice if we could, like in the movies, but we can't. We can't change the past. But you can bring up skillful karma in the present moment, which is what taking on precepts does for you. You make a rule for yourself through your own volition. It's your own prompting, your own wisdom is saying, do this. Nobody can make you or command you to keep precepts, really. It has to come through your own wish, your own wisdom, seeing the value of it. So you say, I'm not going to kill. I'm going to undertake the precept not to kill. That is where you change your karma. If you've previously killed, and many of us have, when we were growing up, we would kill bugs or fish or whatever it is in the past, but now you're sure you're not going to do it. You say, I'm not going to do that. I understand that is depriving another being of life or inflicting pain on another being. It's bad karma. It's not the right way to go. If you make that decision for yourself, you're changing your karma. That's a moment to rejoice in. It's a moment to be happy about. If you keep repeating that, so say for 3 months of the retreat, you keep the 5 precepts or the 8 precepts, every day you can rejoice in those precepts that you're keeping. However good your meditation is, your meditation may seem to go slowly or fast or with difficulty. Your mind, it's all over the place, or you're always falling asleep in your meditation, or you have lots of worries. That's normal. Many people will have all these different challenges as they practice meditation, improve their mindfulness. But if they've grounded themselves in their practice of the precepts, they're changing themselves, transforming themselves for the better. And you can see that, you can witness that for yourself. You can know for yourself, I'm doing this, I'm changing, I'm giving up a habit that previously I killed or stole or drank or indulged in some particular unskillful thing. Now I'm not going to do that. You're changing your habits for the better. And you're also being giving great benefit to the people around you, because when somebody keeps 5 precepts, 8 precepts, the people around them can be very relaxed. You can know this person isn't going to steal from you or hurt you. They're unlikely to abuse you. They still have greed, anger, delusion in their mind affecting them, but they're not going to exploit you, hurt you, harm you, because there's somebody who's undertaken precepts. So it's a great gift to the people around you. Just now, as I was talking to you, right next to me outside the window, there's a whole bunch of kangaroos, because we're living in a monastery full of kangaroos. And normally kangaroos wouldn't come so close to humans, they bounce away from them, but they get used to monks here in the monastery because they know monks don't shoot, don't hunt. So quite often they just graze right next to you. It's just one simple example. And human beings are the same. If you live with someone who keeps precepts, you get a very good feeling from that person. So this is not to be overlooked in our practice. The practice of dana, generosity, virtue, keeping precepts. These are the foundations of our humanity and for our progress in the practice of the Dhamma. And then when you come to meditate, they're already a source of stability to your mind. Of course, in our meditation, we have to refine our mind through the practice of mindfulness, particularly mindfulness, clear comprehension. So we use the breathing, we use the different meditation objects to improve our mindfulness, and then we learn to reflect on these unwholesome mental states that come up, what we call kilesa, mental kilesa. are affecting us all the time. But if you have this shell or protective barrier that comes from the practice of dana and sila, or generosity and virtuous behavior, you get more confidence from that to deal with all the negative states of mind that come up, and it gives you the right environment to practice your meditation in. Okay, so sometimes I get angry, or I get worried, or sometimes I have sexual desire or greed. It comes out, but I'm not going to act on it. I will keep the precepts, undertake to keep the precepts. It gives you that stability and inner confidence to then work on the more subtle movements of the mind. When mental kilesa arise, you can see them, and they don't feel so overwhelming or so damaging to you, because on the outside you're not harming anyone, you're not acting on them. Another thing to do in the Vasa, in the range retreats, maybe make a plan for yourself to meditate every day. And people always say, how much should I meditate? How long should I do it for? Well, I'd say the minimum would be 15 minutes a day, minimum. But if you can do an hour a day or 2 hours a day, even better, depending what your situation allows. It's another thing you can plan for this retreat. When can you meditate? Maybe first thing in the morning is a good time. Late at night, whenever you can clear other activities, other people, other responsibilities away, and prepare your time over the schedule of the next 3 months to commit to doing some meditation. And as Ajahn Chah said, whether you feel like doing it or not, once you've committed, you just do it. So you feel enthusiastic some days you can't be bothered, but you still do it. Some days you feel energetic, some days you feel lazy or you feel tired, you still do it. Making a commitment, 90 days, 3 months, to meditate every day and learn from that. Learn what brings up enthusiasm, energy in your practice, what takes it away. And if you're keeping precepts, you'll find that does support the practice of meditation, because you're not straying too far in the rest of your day when you're not meditating. You're not doing things that are very harmful, that bring up a lot of regret and stir the mind up. You learn that over a period of dedicated practice, committed meditation for 3 months, say. You'll learn more about what the peaceful mind is like when you have mindfulness, more continuous mindfulness, what it's like. When your mindfulness is really weak or disappears, what that's like. It's like you're setting yourself up to learn from your experience for 3 months. Over that period, you can really learn about yourself as a human being. What character traits display themselves most often in your meditation? Do you have a lot of worry, or are you experiencing a lot of anger from various things, or you have a lot of greed and desire, or sleepiness, doubt? If you practice continuously for 3 months, you're going to get to know yourself better. That's part of the benefit of the practice. Practicing mindfulness, you get to know who you are, get to know yourself better, how you think, your habits of mind, your particular attitudes, views on things. You get to see them, and you can learn from that. You're learning to see the changing nature of thoughts, how they come and go, and particularly with the ones that cause you stress and suffering. That helps you to let go, because something doesn't last, it's impermanent. You've let it go before, it's arisen and passed away before, you can do that again. Maybe you start to observe things about yourself that you didn't know before, you didn't recognize. Maybe you have some particular bad habit or unskillful habit that is just so ingrained that you don't normally notice it. But then when you set up your own schedule to meditate every day, maybe something comes up in your mind, a certain way of thinking, certain perceptions, attitudes come up, and you start to notice one of the things, if you're practicing meditation regularly for 3 months, is to, be prepared that it's not always going to be peaceful and, pleasant, refined, blissful states of mind. There may be moments when you have really coarse, ugly states of mind, or disappointing, depressing states of mind as well. And when they come up, when you're experiencing what we call mental suffering, you have to be ready to accept that, acknowledge that, but also not to start blaming meditation as such as the cause of that. Because now you're opening up, you're revealing these things to yourself, things that you have been there affecting you in your subconscious or unconscious before, but now you're making them conscious. And you have to be willing to face those things. Meditation is like turning a light on, the light of mindfulness and wisdom coming up in your mind. You're seeing things a little bit more clearly than before. So that reveals certain things, both good about your good qualities, but also some more negative qualities. But that's not that the meditation is creating those negative qualities. It's just it's revealing them by turning the light on. Like going into a room you haven't been into for 6 months, and it's dusty and there's cobwebs and dirt and junk in there, but it's been dark, so you didn't notice before. Now you turn the light on and you see all the junk. Oh, I've got to clear this up. But you can't blame the light. It's not the light. It's the cause of the junk and the dirt and the cobwebs. It's the fact that you hadn't turned the light on and you hadn't done anything. Well, that's why it became full of junk and rubbish. Our mind is the same. You can't blame the meditation for revealing what's there. It's there whether you meditate or not, but the meditation is helping you. As you bring more mindfulness, more insight up, you see the causes of suffering, which are to be abandoned. And and the practice of bhavana meditation is giving you the tools to recognize suffering where it is coming in your mind, and then to abandon through your own efforts. So that's what we can do for the next 3 months. If you have that faith to use the 3-month range retreat as a time of practice, we have the practice of generosity, precepts, bhavana, cultivating the skillful qualities of mind, abandoning the unskillful qualities, body, speech, and mind, following the Buddhist path. And if you want an end to suffering, like somebody was here at the monastery today saying, they're just so fed up with life, they just want nibbana now. Well, if you want to get to nibbana now quickly, put a lot of effort into your practice. Practice a lot of dana to let go of your attachment. Practice a lot of sila to develop the mindfulness, the restraint. Practice a lot of bhavana to develop mindfulness and insight into the truth. And you'll get to nibbana quickly. Nibbana has its causes, and the cause for nibbana, liberation, is the Eightfold Noble Path, and that's something to be cultivated. You want to get somewhere, to your destination, you have to put the effort into traveling along the road, the pathway to get there. To just sit at the beginning of the pathway and say, I want the destination, but you don't make any effort, it's not going to happen, is it? Even if you only make small steps, slow, small steps along the path, if you don't stop, you'll get there one day. Just like the tortoise, it may travel slowly, but if you keep going, you don't give up, and you're going along the right path, you're following the Buddhist teachings, well, eventually you'll reach Nibbana. Just don't stop, don't give up, don't be put off, don't lose your way, get strayed and by the non-Dhamma, when people take you away from the Dhamma to the non-Dhamma. But if you stay on the right path, sooner or later you'll reach Nibbana. So maybe for today, I'll just say this much and wish you all well in your practice, and may the blessings of Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha guide you and protect you.